Did you know that a single narrow strip of water controls roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply? That beneath one of its islands winds a labyrinth of salt caves so vast that scientists are still mapping them today? Or that hidden inside these same islands sit underground bunkers packed with missiles capable of reaching almost any ship in the corridor within minutes? The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping lane, it is arguably the most consequential 39 kilometers of water on Earth. And we have 50 facts that prove exactly why. So let's get right into it. Fact 50. The Strait of Hormuz is among the most important energy choke points on the planet. In 2024, approximately 20 million barrels of oil passed through this corridor every single day. That is not 20 million barrels per week, not per month, and per day. To visualize that number, 20 million barrels is equivalent to over 3 billion liters of liquid moving through one narrow passage every 24 hours. That is more than 1,300 Olympic swimming pools of oil, daily. On an average day, roughly 100 vessels pass through the Strait of Hormuz. 100 ships, carrying energy that powers industries, cities, and power grids across multiple continents. Almost no pipeline network, no alternative shipping route, no combination of bypasses comes close to replacing what moves through this single stretch of water. The global economy is heavily dependent on 39 kilometers of sea, and almost no one thinks about it until something goes wrong. Fact 49. Roughly 1/5 of global petroleum liquids consumption passes through here every day. Not 1/5 of exported oil, not 1/5 of traded oil. Roughly 1/5 of global petroleum liquids consumption. Every car filling up in Tokyo, every power plant running in Seoul, every factory operating in Shanghai, every airline departing from Mumbai, a significant portion of the energy powering all of it passed through the Strait of Hormuz. When analysts call this the world's most critical choke point, they are not exaggerating for effect. They are describing arithmetic. Fact 48. About 1/3 of all seaborne oil trade in the world moves through this strait. There are oceans, there are seas, there are thousands of shipping routes crossing every corner of the planet. And yet roughly 1/3 of every barrel of oil loaded onto a ship passes through this one corridor. On top of that, around 1/5 of all globally traded liquefied natural gas moves through here as well. Oil, gas, energy, concentrated into a passage barely wider than a medium-sized city. Almost no single geographic feature on Earth carries this much economic weight. Fact 47. At its narrowest point, the entire global energy system squeezes through just 39 kilometers of water. 39 kilometers, roughly the distance of a comfortable morning drive in most major cities. But within those 39 kilometers sit some of the most valuable cargo ships on Earth, some of the most advanced military hardware in existence, and some of the most volatile geopolitical tensions anywhere on the planet. Distance feels different here. 39 kilometers in the Strait of Hormuz is not 39 kilometers anywhere else. Here, it is the difference between global energy stability and serious economic disruption. Fact 46. The usable shipping lanes are far smaller than the strait itself. Despite the 39-kilometer width, the actual lanes available to supertankers are astonishingly tight. One inbound lane, approximately 2 to 3 kilometers wide. One outbound lane, approximately 2 to 3 kilometers wide. A buffer zone between them. That is it. Among the world's largest ships carrying the world's most valuable cargo are confined to corridors barely wider than a small town, with very limited room to maneuver in an emergency. And roughly 100 of those ships pass through every single day. If you want to understand why military planners lose sleep over this strait, start there.
Fact 45. The ships that transit here are among the largest ever built. Very large crude carriers and ultra-large crude carriers. The names alone tell you something.
These are vessels stretching over 400 meters in length, wider than most city blocks, carrying up to 3 million barrels of oil in a single trip. Vessels this size cannot stop quickly, cannot turn sharply, cannot deviate easily from their lanes without serious risk. When a ship this large enters a narrow lane with missiles positioned along both shores, the geometry alone becomes a form of pressure. The strait does not need to be blocked to be dangerous. It just needs to be narrow. And it already is. Fact 44. The lanes pass through the territorial waters of Iran and Oman under international transit passage rules. Under UNCLOS, ships have the legal right to continuous transit through international straits without seeking permission from the bordering states. Legal rights on paper, physical exposure in reality. Every ship still moves within range of both coastlines throughout the entire passage. The legal framework allows transit. The geographic framework means that no ship passing through is ever entirely beyond the reach of what sits on those shores. Rights and reality are two different things in the Strait of Hormuz. Fact 43. Iran controls 3 strategically positioned islands directly alongside the shipping lanes: Keshem, Larak, Abu Musa. Do not think of these as beaches or fishing villages. Think of them as heavily fortified positions, placed at the exact points where supertankers have almost no choice but to pass nearby. Larak sits at the throat of the strait, providing close-range capability. Keshem is the largest island in the Persian Gulf and serves as Iran's primary military hub in the region. Abu Musa extends Iran's reach deep into the southern Gulf, providing early warning and a forward position. 3 islands, 3 roles, 1 objective. Influence over the corridor. Fact 42. The underground facilities inside these islands are built to withstand significant airstrikes. Hidden inside the mountainous terrain of Keshem and other islands is a network of fortified underground facilities. Bunkers carved into rock, mobile systems that can be repositioned rapidly before a counterstrike can be coordinated. To destroy deeply buried facilities requires heavy bunker-busting weapons, capable of penetrating substantial depths of earth or reinforced concrete before detonating. These are not defenses built for a minor confrontation. They are built for a sustained campaign, and they sit directly alongside the shipping lanes that carry the global energy supply. Fact 41. Iran's fast attack strategy is specifically designed for the confined geometry of the strait. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps does not rely on large warships here. It relies on speed, numbers, and controlled chaos. Fleets of small fast boats, often exceeding 50 knots, multiple boats approaching a single cargo ship from several directions simultaneously, targeting the bridge, the engine room, deploying naval mines into the ship's path. In open ocean, a captain has options: evasive maneuvers, speed, distance. In a narrow lane, options become extremely limited very quickly. The strait's geometry reduces those options before any engagement even begins. Fact 40. Anti-ship missiles positioned along Iran's northern coastline can reach most points in the strait within minutes. The northern coastline belongs to Iran and is highly mountainous. Natural terrain providing concealment for missile systems and observation posts that require almost no engineering to hide. Anti-ship missiles like the Noor and the Qadr have ranges exceeding 100 kilometers. The strait at its widest is 39 kilometers. Iranian coastal batteries can cover most of the strait from the northern shore. Almost every ship, almost every lane, nearly all of it within range. The mountains did not need to be weaponized. Geography provided the advantage before a single system was ever installed. Fact 39. Oman's Musandam Peninsula forms the southern jaw of the strait. Jutting northward into the strait like a stone fist, the Musandam Peninsula is among the most dramatic pieces of coastal geography in Arabia. Its mountains plunge almost vertically into the water. Fjord-like inlets carve between limestone cliffs, rising hundreds of meters above the sea. From the summit of Jebel Harim, over 2,000 meters high, Radar stations maintain continuous surveillance across much of the strait's width. Oman coordinates the traffic separation scheme, governing how every vessel moves through the corridor. While Iran watches from the north, Oman watches from the south. Every ship that passes does so under the eyes of both. Fact 38. The strait is also one of the more seismically active maritime corridors on Earth. The same tectonic collision between the Arabian and Eurasian plates that built the flanking mountains continues today. The Makran subduction zone runs along Iran's southern coast, just east of the strait, a zone capable of producing significant seismic events. The strait is not just geopolitically volatile. The ground beneath it is geologically volatile as well. The tension here is not only political, it is planetary. Fact 37. And this is where it gets strange. In its current form, the Strait of Hormuz developed after the last ice age, when global sea levels were roughly 120 meters lower than today. The entire Persian Gulf was a dry river plain. The rivers of what are now Iran, Iraq, the UAE, and the Arabian Peninsula all flowed across that exposed ground. The passage that now carries roughly 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption did not exist. Just land. The world's most critical energy corridor has only existed in its current form for approximately 14,000 years. Among the geologically younger major water bodies on the planet, and already among the most strategically significant pieces of geography on Earth. Fact 36. Over 70% of all oil transiting the strait is destined for Asia. Not Europe, not North America, Asia. China, India, Japan, Singapore, South Korea. These 5 countries account for the overwhelming majority of oil passing through Hormuz. Japan imports nearly all of its energy. A massive share of that energy comes through this corridor. China's industrial economy runs in significant part on oil that passed through Hormuz recently. A serious disruption at the strait is not a regional problem. It is a global one, felt first and hardest in Asia. Fact 35. Only 2 countries in the region have pipelines capable of partially bypassing the strait: Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline can transport up to 5 million barrels per day to ports on the Red Sea. The UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline can move up to 1.5 million barrels per day directly to the Gulf of Oman, bypassing the strait entirely. But here's what makes those numbers sobering. Roughly 20 million barrels per day pass through Hormuz. The maximum combined bypass capacity of both pipelines under optimal conditions reaches around 6 to 7 million barrels per day. Even at full capacity, both pipelines together cannot come close to replacing what passes through the strait. The bypass exists, it just cannot substitute for what it was meant to replace. Fact 34. Now this one changes the way you think about this waterway entirely. The Strait of Hormuz sits beside one of the most extraordinary geological landscapes of any maritime corridor on Earth. Hormuz Island, resting directly beside the strait, is not just a military position. It is a salt dome, pushed upward from deep beneath the seabed, carrying geological layers from completely different eras to the surface simultaneously. The result is a landscape that looks almost painted. Bright red iron oxide soils, white salt crystal fields, yellow sulfur deposits, purple manganese formations, green volcanic outcrops, all within walking distance of each other on one small island. Each color is a different chapter of Earth's history, compressed into a few square kilometers. Among the most strategically tense waterways on Earth, sits beside one of the most geologically remarkable islands in Asia.
Fact 33. The Rainbow Valley of Hormuz Island is among the most visually extraordinary landscapes in the Middle East. Slopes of crimson earth descending beside ridges of gold and orange,
dark volcanic rock appearing between them like brushstrokes on a canvas, shaped by heat and pressure over millions of years. The colors are not static. With every storm and rainfall, the minerals mix into new patterns. The landscape reshapes itself continuously. No artist designed this. The planet did. Wind moves softly across the valley floor, carrying grains of brightly tinted sand along narrow paths between hills that shift color with the angle of the light. A short distance from radar stations and military infrastructure, nature is quietly producing some of the most remarkable scenery in the region. Fact 32. Beneath Hormuz Island lies a labyrinth of salt caves. Deep inside the island winds a cave system formed where pressurized salt from beneath the Earth's crust was pushed upward over millions of years. Inside, the temperature drops sharply. Walls of white and amber salt shimmer under faint light, reflecting subtle tones of gold, pink, and pale gray. In some chambers, the surface feels smooth and almost luminous. In others, mineral crystals have grown in jagged formations over centuries. Small streams of mineral water trickle through the cave floor, dissolving salt, carving narrow channels deeper into the rock. The cave is still forming, still changing, drop by drop. From the outside, Hormuz appears dry and austere. Beneath its mineral-stained hills flows a hidden world of crystals and underground chambers, a labyrinth of salt and shadow sitting beneath one of the most heavily watched islands in the region. Fact 31. Keshem Island is home to the longest salt cave system in the world. The Namakdan Salt Cave System on Keshem extends beyond 6,400 meters of explored passages, making it the longest salt cave on Earth. Salt caves require extremely specific geological conditions to form and are rare almost anywhere on the planet. Inside, salt stalactites hanging from ceilings, underground streams carrying dissolved minerals, chambers large enough to walk through comfortably. All of it still active, still forming. This is not a tourist attraction with guardrails and soft lighting. This is a raw geological system operating beneath the surface of the largest island in the Persian Gulf. The same island that houses Iran's primary military hub in the region. The most heavily fortified island in the Gulf also contains the longest salt caves on Earth. Fact 30. And this is where the geography keeps surprising you. Keshem Island is home to the Middle East's first UNESCO Global Geopark. The Keshem Geopark stretches across the island, revealing an extraordinary geological record. Narrow canyons twisting through pale rock, salt domes exposed by erosion, long valleys shaped by water that vanished thousands of years ago, folded sedimentary hills revealing the geological history of the Persian Gulf in a single landscape. In places, the rock crumbles like dry clay. In others, it shines with crystals of salt. Life persists here regardless. Mangrove forests breathe along the tidal shores. Migratory birds cross the quiet sky above the valleys. One island, significant military importance, significant geological importance, both existing simultaneously on the same piece of land. Fact 29. The Chaku Canyon on Keshem is among the most dramatic slot canyons in Asia. Walls closing to barely a meter apart in places, rising 30 meters on both sides in swirling layered rock worn smooth by ancient water. The canyon winds through the island like a crack in the earth that could not decide which direction to go. Light enters from above in narrow beams, hitting mineral walls that shift from white to rust to pale gold depending on the hour. You can reach out and touch both walls simultaneously in the tightest sections. Outside those walls, radar stations, patrol boats, military infrastructure. Inside them, silence, ancient geology, and light doing things that are difficult to describe. The same island, two completely different worlds, separated by a few steps. Fact 28. The Stars Valley on Hormuz Island looks like something arrived here from somewhere else entirely. Eroded pillars and hollows carved by wind and water into shapes that have almost no parallel in the surrounding landscape. The ground is soft underfoot in some places, hard and crystalline in others. Local legend says the valley formed when a star fell here. Standing inside it, you understand why that legend exists. The landscape does not look like it belongs to ordinary geological processes. Scientists describe it in terms of salt dome geology and differential erosion. The legend captures the experience more completely than the science does. Fact 27. The Portuguese built a fortress on Hormuz Island in the 16th century to control the same passage that major powers compete over today. In the early 1500s, Portuguese naval forces seized control of Hormuz, recognizing immediately that whoever held this island held leverage over one of the most valuable maritime trade routes in the known world. Ships at that time carried spices from India, silk from Persia, pearls from the Gulf, silver from Arabia. The fort was built from red coral stone and local earth. Its thick walls overlook the strait from a rampart that still stands today. Wind moves through broken corridors. Salt air reaches the courtyard long after the soldiers have gone. Empires changed, trade routes shifted, the weapons improved beyond recognition. But the fort still watches the same strait for the same reason it was always built, to watch it. Control the passage, control everything beyond it. Fact 26. The strait has been a center of global trade for over 2,000 years. Long before oil tankers, long before traffic separation schemes, the Strait of Hormuz was among the busiest and most contested maritime passages on Earth. Ancient Mesopotamian trade routes ran through here. Persian Empire ships used this corridor. Arab dhow sailors crossed these waters for centuries, carrying goods between Persian Gulf ports and the coast of East Africa and India. The strait did not become important when oil was discovered beneath the Gulf. It was already important. Oil simply made it indispensable. Fact 25. Everything covered so far is only the first half of the story. Hormuz Island sits directly alongside the shipping lanes at the throat of the strait, among the most precisely positioned assets Iran controls in this corridor. Not the largest, not the most heavily armed, among the most precisely positioned. Fast attack boats staged at Hormuz can reach a passing cargo ship in minutes. For a supertanker crew in a narrow lane with almost no room to maneuver, minutes is not enough time to respond effectively to much of anything. Hormuz does not need to launch an attack to exert pressure. Its presence alone changes the calculation for every captain who knows it is there. Presence is the weapon. Fact 24. When American warships and Iranian patrol boats have operated simultaneously in the strait, they have been close enough to see each other's faces clearly. Not through radar screens, not through satellite imagery, through binoculars. Radio challenges broadcast across open channels, engine sounds carrying across the water, the sound of waves underneath everything. This has happened multiple times. Naval standoffs in a corridor so narrow that the human element never fully disappears behind the technology. In most geopolitical confrontations, adversaries are separated by thousands of kilometers. Here, the tension exists in the space between two vessels, close enough for crews to look each other in the eye. That is a different kind of pressure entirely. Fact 23. The Musandam Peninsula contains some of the most dramatic fjord landscapes in the Arab world. Rugged limestone mountains plunging almost vertically into the sea. Deep inlets carving between cliff faces rising hundreds of meters above narrow channels of turquoise water. Traditional wooden boats gliding across surfaces shifting from deep blue in open water to bright turquoise near the shore. Fishermen traveling between small coastal villages tucked into sheltered inlets, accessible mostly by sea. These are the Arabian fjords. Formed over thousands of years as tectonic forces lifted the limestone ranges while the sea carved inlets between them. From the water, the cliffs appear immense, layer after layer of pale rock rising above bays and coves that have sheltered boats for centuries. The strait does not end at the military hardware. Around the corner from the radar stations and the patrol routes lies a coastline that looks borrowed from Norway and placed by accident in Arabia. Fact 22. The highest peak of the Musandam Peninsula contains marine fossils thousands of meters above the sea that formed them. Jebel Harim stands over 2,000 meters above sea level. Its slopes reveal layers of ancient limestone formed beneath a prehistoric ocean long before the Arabian Peninsula existed in anything like its current form. Fossils of coral, marine shells, organisms that lived underwater hundreds of millions of years ago, embedded in rock that now stands 2,000 meters above the sea. The mountain was once seafloor, then tectonic forces lifted it into the sky. Stand on the summit of Jebel Harim and you are standing on an ancient ocean bottom, looking down at a sea that your geological foundations once lay beneath. Fact 21. Jebel Harim hosts a surprisingly rich wildlife ecosystem. Arabian tar, a wild mountain goat found in very few places on Earth, climbing the steep cliffs with a precision that makes the terrain look simple. Desert foxes moving through rocky ravines at dusk, Egyptian vultures gliding along mountain thermals, kestrels hovering briefly before diving, hardy grasses and scattered shrubs growing in pockets of soil between rocks at high altitude, sustaining a fragile ecosystem in a landscape that receives almost no rainfall. One of the most militarily significant maritime corridors on Earth contains a mountain ecosystem of real ecological richness, life persisting quietly regardless of what is happening in the strait below. Fact 20. Traditional wooden boat building on Keshem Island is recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Along the shores of Keshem, craftsmen still build large wooden dhow vessels using techniques passed from master to apprentice across generations. Thick beams curving upward, planks shaped with saw and hammer and patient hands. Some of these ships measure more than 30 meters in length, built almost entirely by hand. For centuries, Keshem shipbuilders constructed vessels that sailed between Persia, Arabia, India, and the coast of East Africa. The same maritime trade network that made the strait strategically significant long before anyone drilled for oil. When a finished vessel finally touches water, the harbor grows briefly silent. Another ship has joined a tradition that has outlasted every empire that ever tried to control the waters around it. Fact 19. The ancient wind-catcher architecture of Laft village on Keshem is among the most remarkable examples of passive climate engineering in the world. Laft Old City stands along the northern coast of Keshem, facing the tidal channels of the Persian Gulf. Narrow alleys wind between houses built of coral stone and sun-baked earth. Above them rise dozens of tall wind catchers, slender towers designed to pull cool air downward into shaded rooms. No electricity, no refrigeration, no machinery, just geometry responding to geography. These structures have been standing and functioning for centuries in one of the hottest inhabited regions on Earth. A fortified island near one of the world's most watched corridors also contains some of the most elegant climate engineering in human architectural history. Fact 18. The village of Kumzar at the northern tip of Musandam is home to one of the rarest languages on Earth. Remote, isolated by rugged cliffs and deep fjords, accessible mostly by boat. Kumzar is a fishing village where life moves at the rhythm of tides and weather rather than highways and schedules. The people here speak Kumzari, a language found almost nowhere else in the world, blending elements of Persian, Arabic, Portuguese, and older regional dialects into a living linguistic record of nearly every maritime culture that passed through these waters over the last 1,000 years. The language is a map of the strait's history. Every trading culture that passed through left traces behind, and the people of Kumzar kept all of them. A village at the edge of one of the world's most watched waterways, speaking a language the world has almost entirely forgotten. That paradox is quiet, but it is powerful. Fact 17. The mangrove forests of Keshem Island are among the most northerly mangrove ecosystems on Earth. Mangroves typically grow in tropical coastal zones. The presence of thriving mangrove forest in the Persian Gulf at this latitude is geographically unusual. These forests grow along the tidal shores of the island, filtering water, stabilizing coastline, providing nursery habitat for the fish species that sustain the fishing communities of the region. One of the most heavily fortified island chains in the Middle East is also home to a rare and ecologically significant coastal forest. The strait contains both extremes simultaneously, and neither one seems fully aware of the other. Fact 16. The geological forces that make this region strategically significant also make it visually extraordinary. The Badabi-Surt mineral terraces in Iran's northern coastal mountains have been building cascading terraced pools for thousands of years. Colors ranging from deep orange to blood red to pale cream, iron oxide and calcium carbonate precipitating out layer by microscopic layer over millennia. The same tectonic forces that positioned Iran's coastline for strategic leverage also produced some of the most visually remarkable natural formations in Asia. Danger and wonder, built by the same geology. Side by side, always. Fact 15. Iran operates a significant number of fast attack craft, specifically suited to the confined waters of the strait. These are not conventional warships, small, fast, often exceeding 50 knots, designed for swarm tactics in narrow corridors, where large warships lose much of their maneuverability advantage. Multiple boats approaching a cargo ship from several directions simultaneously, targeting the bridge, the engine room, deploying mines into the ship's path. Options for a supertanker crew in a narrow lane become extremely limited very quickly. The geography reduces those options before any engagement begins. The strait itself is the strategy. Fact 14. Allied navies have developed specific countermeasures for the threats concentrated in this corridor. Helicopters targeting fast attack boats from the air before they can close to attack range. Mine countermeasure vessels using sonar and underwater drones to detect and neutralize naval mines ahead of convoy routes. Advanced combat systems tracking and intercepting anti-ship missiles mid-flight. Close-in weapon systems designed to destroy anything that penetrates the outer defensive layers. The strait has made nearly every form of naval warfare simultaneously relevant in one place. Mines, missiles, swarm boats, drones, air operations, all potentially in play. In roughly 39 kilometers of water, few bodies of water on Earth concentrate this density of active military consideration in such a confined space. Fact 13. Abu Musa Island is claimed by both Iran and the United Arab Emirates, and Iran controls it. In 1971, just as the UAE was forming as an independent nation, Iranian forces occupied Abu Musa Island. The UAE has disputed Iranian control ever since. The island sits deep in the southern Gulf, extending Iran's military reach beyond the strait itself. Radar systems on Abu Musa can track incoming vessels at significant distances, providing advance warning of any approach. This territorial dispute is not a historical footnote. It is an active, unresolved conflict over an island whose geographic position makes it among the most strategically significant pieces of land in the Gulf. Two nations, one island, no resolution in sight. And the world's energy supply passing within range of it every single day.
Fact 12. The traffic separation scheme of the strait is one of the most complex maritime traffic management systems anywhere on Earth. Every vessel transiting the strait must follow a strictly defined route. Inbound lane, outbound lane, buffer zone, mandatory separation. Oman coordinates this system from radar installations on Jebel Harim, monitoring every vessel, managing a flow of traffic that never stops. Roughly 100 ships every day. The system was designed to prevent collisions in tight conditions with enormous ships, but it carries a second consequence that no traffic management document discusses openly. Predictable routes make every ship predictable. The safety system and the vulnerability are the same system. Fact 11.
The economic consequences of seriously disrupting transit through the strait would likely be felt across nearly every major economy within weeks. Energy markets would react quickly, oil prices would rise, shipping insurance premiums would surge, supply chains dependent on Asian manufacturing would face disruption. Countries with limited strategic reserves would begin rationing. Airlines would face fuel cost increases. Power generation costs would rise in countries dependent on imported gas. The strait does not need to be fully closed to cause serious disruption. A prolonged period of elevated uncertainty would be sufficient to trigger consequences rippling across nearly every major economy. The global economy has almost no shock absorber large enough to cushion a sustained Hormuz disruption, and everyone who manages that economy knows it. Fact 10. Iran has repeatedly signaled its ability to disrupt the strait during periods of geopolitical tension. The geography gives those signals credibility. With coastal missiles, island positions, fast boat capability, and mine-laying capacity all positioned along the corridor, Iran has the physical means to severely complicate transit even without closing the strait entirely, creating enough uncertainty to spike insurance premiums, forcing convoy escorts, slowing transit times, generating the economic effects of disruption without the full military commitment of an actual blockade. That strategy, pressure without full escalation, is arguably more effective than outright closure, because it is harder to decisively respond to and considerably easier to sustain. Fact 9. The red beaches of Hormuz Island are among the most visually unusual coastal landscapes in Asia. The island's extraordinary mineral geology does not stay on the hillsides. It reaches the shoreline. Iron-rich red sand meets the blue water of the Persian Gulf. The junction where red earth meets blue water looks unlike almost anything else on a natural coastline. Red sand, blue sea. Almost no gradual transition between them. Fishermen work these shores. Boats rest on the red sand. Children run between the water and the mineral hills. A heavily watched island in the most strategic waterway in the Middle East has red beaches that photographers travel thousands of kilometers to see. Hormuz contains both realities simultaneously, and neither cancels the other. Fact 8. The Makran coastline east of the strait is home to submarine mud volcanoes that occasionally produce temporary islands. The Makran subduction zone running along Iran's southern coast generates geological activity that periodically forces pressurized gas and mud upward from the seabed. Following a major earthquake near the Pakistan-Iran border in 2013, a new island appeared offshore, approximately 90 meters wide, 15 meters tall, pushed up from the seabed by submarine mud volcanic activity. Fishermen walked on it within days. By 2014, it had largely sunk again. The geology of the Hormuz region is so active that the coastal map is not entirely fixed. Islands appear, islands disappear. The Earth here does not sit still. Fact 7. The waters around the strait support ecologically significant coral reef communities. Coral communities adapted to the temperature fluctuations and high salinity conditions of the Persian Gulf, supporting hundreds of species of fish and marine life. These reefs exist in waters regularly traversed by supertankers, patrolled by military vessels, subject to the risks that come with one of the densest energy shipping corridors in the world. The ecological and the strategic exist in the same water column, separated only by depth. The coral grows below, the tankers pass above. The strait asks a great deal of the same water. Fact 6. Hormuz Island was once the center of one of the most powerful trading kingdoms in the medieval world. Before the Portuguese arrived, and before the modern nations of the region existed, Hormuz was an independent kingdom, a city-state controlling maritime trade between the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf for centuries. Persian merchants, Arab traders, Indian sailors, all passed through and contributed to the wealth of Hormuz. The kingdom grew prosperous far beyond its small size. because its geography gave it leverage that few could afford to ignore. Marco Polo visited Hormuz in the 13th century and described it as a great city of commerce. The Portuguese recognized that leverage and built a fort to hold it 6 centuries ago. Every major power that has wanted to control the Persian Gulf has eventually had to engage with Hormuz. The geography makes it difficult to avoid. Fact 5. The strait has been the site of multiple real-world military incidents in recent decades. Tanker attacks in the Gulf of Oman near the strait's eastern entrance, strikes on commercial vessels attributed to Iranian-linked forces, seizures of commercial tankers during periods of heightened tension. These were not hypothetical escalations. Actual ships stopped, actual crews detained, actual oil delayed, actual insurance premiums surged. The strait is not merely a potential crisis zone, it is an active one. Events that would represent serious escalation in most other geographic contexts occur here with a regularity that the global news cycle has almost normalized. Almost. The tension stretched across the surface of this water is not metaphorical. It is structural, built into the geography itself, and it does not switch off. Fact 4. The depth of the strait is what makes supertanker transit physically possible. Despite its narrow width, the Strait of Hormuz is deep enough to accommodate the largest ships ever built, very large and ultra-large crude carriers. Drawing up to 25 meters of water requires substantial depth clearance. The strait provides it. In the main transit lanes, depths reach around 60 to 80 meters in key sections, enough clearance for even the deepest drafted vessels to pass. The combination of sufficient depth and extreme narrowness is what makes the strait so difficult to replace. Deep enough for the largest ships, narrow enough to be influenced by whoever holds the shores. If it were shallower, the tankers could not use it. If it were wider, it would be far harder to pressure. The geometry is precisely what makes it both essential and exposed. Fact 3. A serious disruption to the strait would likely affect nearly every major economy on Earth within weeks. Not just the oil importing nations, not just the Gulf producers, nearly every major economy. Because oil does not just fuel cars and power plants, it is embedded in the production of plastics, fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, synthetic fabrics, industrial chemicals, transportation of almost every kind. A prolonged disruption to roughly 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption would not create an energy crisis in isolation. It would create cascading disruption across almost every supply chain that touches petroleum-derived products, which is most of them. The strait is not simply a pipe that powers lights in Asia. It is a foundational input to the industrial functioning of the modern world. And it is 39 kilometers wide. Fact 2. The Strait of Hormuz is the geography that shaped the modern Gulf states. Without the strait, the oil beneath the Persian Gulf would have no viable route to market at scale. Without a route to market, the oil generates far less economic value. Without that value, there is no revenue at the scale that transformed the region. The strait did not just carry the oil, it made the oil worth extracting in the first place. The geography of one narrow passage created the conditions that transformed one of the most resource-rich but logistically isolated regions on Earth into some of the wealthiest nations in modern history. Remove the strait, and the entire economic geography of the contemporary Middle East looks fundamentally different. Fact 1. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a choke point, it is a mirror. Everything the modern world depends on, almost everything it fears, nearly everything it cannot afford to lose. All of it concentrated into roughly 39 kilometers of water between two shores. The oil that powers the global economy, the military hardware pointed across it from both sides, the ancient forts watching from red volcanic hills, The salt caves forming slowly in the dark beneath the islands. The fishermen speaking a language assembled from every civilization that ever passed through. The coral growing quietly below the tanker lanes. The red sand where mineral earth meets the sea. All of it in 39 kilometers. The strait does not care about geopolitics. It does not care about oil prices or naval doctrine or international law. It is water between two pieces of land. But the world cares about it deeply, continuously. Because geography does not negotiate, it simply is. And the Strait of Hormuz simply is among the most consequential pieces of geography on the surface of the Earth. This is Geography Explored.